Okay.
Thank you, Gwen.
I'll read this wonderful thing here. Good morning. As chair of the tree committee, I'm declaring that an emergency exists, and I am invoking the provisions of RSA 91A:2, 3B. Federal, state, and local officials have determined that gatherings of 10 or more people pose a substantial risk to our community in its continuing efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19. In concurring with their determination, I also find that this meeting is imperative to the continued operation of town government and services, which are vital to public safety and confidence during this emergency. As such, this meeting will be conducted without a quorum of this body physically present in the same location. At this time, I also welcome members of the public accessing this meeting remotely. Even though this meeting is being conducted in a unique manner, under unusual circumstances, the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. Thank you for your patience. Okay.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I guess we go around the room and you say if anybody's in the room with you. I'm Eileen Flockhart, and there's nobody here with me.
And
Hey,
Kelly.
Perkins. I'm in the office alone. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, Jay.
Sally Ward, I'm here alone.
Okay.
Okay, Gwen English, I am here alone.
Okay.
Kristen Murphy, I am here alone.
All right. Either Greg.
Yeah, Greg Beeson, Parks and Rec Director. I'm in my office and I'm alone.
Okay.
Good morning, Greg Jordan, Rockingham County Forester. I'm at my home office alone today. Just an FYI, I will need to check out about 9 o'clock this morning, though.
Okay, Greg, thanks. And we'll sort of sit tight, and if Kevin and Sarah and Jen join us, we can add them to the list. I guess the first order of business is to look through those minutes, which I hope you got a chance to peek at. I didn't find anything weird or strange or anything that needed to be corrected, but I don't know if anyone else did.
The only thing I saw was on page 2 refers to me. Sally is willing to contact Durham, and actually it was Dover. I contacted.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Because I think that Deb was doing Durham.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Sally. Sorry, I missed that one.
No worries.
Dover.
Okay. Okay, I didn't see anything else unless anybody else did. Can't remember. Did we vote and second and do all that stuff with minutes?
We should.
Okay.
Yeah. So I move we approve the minutes as amended.
Okay. Can I second?
Sure.
All right, I'll second them.
Shall we vote?
Okay, everybody who loves those minutes, raise your hand or stick your hand somewhere in the...
I assume I don't vote.
Yes, right. Okay. All right. Minutes are approved with that correction. One of the things, just a quick little update. I checked with AJ Dupuy on the status of our Tree City USA, and he said he's approved it from his end. And I guess the woman who does all the official stuff is a one-woman operation, and she's pretty swamped. So when we get something that looks cute and official is down the road, but he said, you're basically good to go. So that was nice to hear. And then I did hear from the folks who created the Pollinator grant for schools that Lincoln Street School has been accepted as one of their grantees. And So that project can go ahead and they get $1,100 to work with for building a garden and stocking plants and figuring out watering and doing the whole thing. So that ought to get their green team and kids at school a little bit excited about that. So I was pretty thrilled to hear that all that effort paid off, put a little bright spot in what's been a tough school year. So those are the two little happy pieces of news. And the other thing I want to mention is that I have been in touch with Natasha, who did the filming for the tree walk and talk. Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin Breen, you're down there. Hi, how are you? You officially there with nobody with you, Kevin?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'll put you on the list. So she's done all that video work for the tree walk and talk. She says a piece of it will be in there, I think, every week or every other week. Exeter TV does this is what happened this week. So that'll be in that segment. But then the whole video will be uploaded to YouTube, she said. Either Friday, I wasn't sure whether from her email whether it was this Friday or Friday of next week. So as soon as I find out, I will let everybody know so we can go take a look at it. So it'll be interesting to see, and it'll go up hopefully onto our website, so that people can click on it there too. So we could, maybe if we can take a little piece of it on the Conservation Commission Facebook page and say, go look at our website and you can see the whole thing, then it could be a way for the tree walk to have a little more visibility. So
that should be no problem at all to add.
Oh, great. Okay. So I can let you know, Kristen, as soon as I get the go ahead from Natasha. So that's the news from that front. And I think that the tree walk was great. I mean, we all had a good time. Even the kids, although some of them look like they had sort of like, oh, my mother says I have to come. They got into it, and I was pleased about that. So maybe there are more ways we can, focus a more kid-friendly kind of thing as restrictions get eased a little bit. So I'm looking forward to the time when we can do that. But
the pictures were great. Yeah, I enjoyed the photos. And I did put them up on the Facebook page.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's right. You commented. Yep.
Yeah. So inch by inch, we, get a little visibility out there and people go, oh, is that what you guys do? Yeah. So I'd like to go, on to the next topic that everybody had, who was asked to take a look at different towns and what they do in terms of the town tree ordinance. And, maybe if we could take folks, I can do Portsmouth last. Let's hear from those of you who, I know, Sally, you did Dover.
I did Dover.
You want to tell us what you found?
Yeah. So I looked at the Dover website and found the tree ordinance. They don't actually call it a tree ordinance, but that's what it is. And it is part of the town ordinances. And I spoke with the town planner about their work, and their ordinance, it makes specification about what approval is needed to trim or cut back trees that are on public land. So their ordinance covers all trees that are on public land, which is rights of ways and public parks, etc. The tree ordinance does specify that there is an arborist, but in fact, there isn't an arborist. There was originally when the tree ordinance was passed, which I think was, can't quite remember, I think it was 2014. And they since lost that position. And so it is a town ordinance, and the enforcement of it falls to the committee that's comparable to our public works. They don't call it public works; they call it community service or something like that.
Yeah.
So the person who's in charge of that is the point person for enforcement. But I gathered from what the planner said, his name is Steve. I gathered from what he said that it's rather inconsistent because the person who's in charge has a lot on his plate because it's public works. So it's, they've done a lot of work. And he did ask the question about logging and what kind of provisions or what kinds of thoughts we have about that. And I said, we hadn't gotten that far because they have some specific things that they've done in Dover with regard to cutting down of trees for logging purposes. It is Dover is a Tree City USA city. Mm-hmm. And they have maps of trees on the town website, which is useful. And then we know from Kristen that they did that tree inventory, which was the citizen based effort, which we can talk about. I didn't really look into that in much detail because that wasn't part of the tree ordinance per se. So I would say Dover has some good ideas, and I think there are things that we can borrow from them for our ordinance. It is pretty straightforward and not particularly long. So I think that would be what I would recommend, is that's a goal for us, that we don't want the original tree ordinance to be overly long and technical. Yeah. In any case, it's a town ordinance. Enforcement goes to the director of public works.
Gwen, do you want to tell us about Newburyport?
I will. And I have to confess it right off the bat that I didn't talk to anybody. I went on their website and pulled off their 17 or 19 pages of information about their ordinance. It is a city ordinance. They are a tree city. They have a tree commission. All of those members are appointed. They have a tree warden, and in their document, they say that the tree warden should be a certified arborist or somebody with experience. So they have a little wiggle room there with this person's background and qualifications. And he is the enforcement officer, or he can also have a designee if he is unable to address a certain issue at a certain time. There's another person that can come to his assistance and deal with whatever issue has come to the table. But they have, it's a very comprehensive, as I said, it's like 19 pages of information, and they cover absolutely everything. The part of it is just definitions of various terms that one would maybe want to be aware of going into this. So there are pages of that, but the rest of it is all kind of the nuts and bolts about what can be done with trees, how do you go about dealing with a tree that maybe is likely to fall, what types of trees can be planted. It's I don't want to say it's unwieldy, but it sounds very different from what what Dover has. And maybe there's a happy compromise between something like this and what Dover has and what other towns have. Just because I felt like I should have something from towns from New Hampshire. I know you've taken care of this one, Eileen, but I did look at Portsmouth quickly and looked at their ordinance. I went to, and let me just flip through. The one thing, and I'm not going to steal your show, Eileen, but the one thing I found interesting with Portsmouth is that they have 2 pages of information on how to plant a tree. One is kind of a picture of a tree and aspects of it that one needs to follow when they're putting a tree into the ground. I thought that was kind of an interesting and helpful part of their process. I looked at Nashua. They have a zoning ordinance, and it's really, from what I could gather, it really looks like it's just for trees that have been unlawfully cut or damaged within a wetland buffer. It really doesn't address street trees. So I will look into that a little bit more and see if I can find anything on that. And it's pretty brief. They do tree for tree replacement, financial security for tree replacement. They have some exemptions. It's very brief. Keene has looks like it's a city ordinance, very brief. And it looks like this is under the purview, any issues are under the purview of the mayor, the city council, and DPW. And it's just like 4 bullet points, very brief. And I don't know, Greg Bisson, I know you have contact with, it sounds like you have contact with people from Keene. So I don't know if you've talked to anybody there about it. I may have just skipped over it. It's sometimes hard to find the details about ordinances.
When you nailed it on the head. Talking to the director of Parks and Rec over there, it does fall under TPW, but it's very minimum, and it focuses on street trees. There really isn't much to it, he says. But the exciting part, I know it's kind of a little bit off topic, but I'll talk about it later, is the GIS system he uses for all his trees. So, and again, that's managed through Public Works and their planning department, but, and the Parks and Rec pays for it, which I don't understand that, but it works.
Okay. Yeah, that was an exciting, you brought that up at the last meeting and I was intrigued by that.
Yeah.
GIS. And Durham, it's in their regs. They have a tree warden. Not so much about, it's more about subdivisions and what can be planted, what needs to be done during construction, maintenance requirements. It's really not a street tree. What I found anyway was really not a street tree ordinance. So I was sort of disappointed that I didn't come up with more. I mean, Newburyport, Portsmouth seemed to be the two that had the most, and it sounds like Dover's kind of right in there too. But I didn't get anything else that I could really sink my teeth into. So so that's kind of it for me.
Okay, great, thank you. I very briefly went through some of the stuff that Deb sent about her contacts with Durham. Were you able to see more of that when she sent it to you, Kristen?
Yeah, she put it up on the document with a link to the ordinance itself. Is everyone able to access that? I know there was some who couldn't. Okay, yeah,
I got it. Let me briefly go through some of the stuff. I did talk to the arborist, the fellow in Portsmouth, Charlie Baxter, who was wonderful and probably spent 15 minutes on the phone telling me about the ordinance. And they're in the process. I guess they had done their ordinance 2014. I think they were in the process of improving it. And after I finally found it and looked at it, I was like, woo, and this looked pretty darn fine to me. They have they have a couple of arborists on staff. They have a whole system of fines for, $1,000 fine if you do something. And they have a legal department which will enforce that, which is something that I don't think too many towns have access to. And he was hoping to up that and make it more specific to the size of the tree and everything else. But he was very helpful, and he said he'd be happy to talk to us again and give us some more information. I think what I'm hearing from several of these towns is that if there's a way, and I know we've gotten guidance from AJ on this, is there a way to have the town ordinance, the tree ordinance itself, be one as simple and clear as you could make it, and then have a whole section of specifications which would fall into the category of how to plant a tree and what your penalties would be if you did something right, and all that other stuff, which would be in a separate document, which could be easily adjusted as the years go on. And the tree ordinance would be, sort of written in stone for a good while, so that you didn't have to keep reworking the whole Bible of stuff. You could have one basic document that says, this is what we believe, and this is what we would like the urban canopy and everything else to recognize. And then the specifics would be the kind of thing that could be more flexible. If the Asian beetle comes in and destroys trees, well, then you make an adjustment to say this tree is on the invasive species list, and we're going to do something about it. So there would be flexibility with that. But the City of Portsmouth was pretty impressive, and it took a while to find their document, but it was not hugely cumbersome. It was like 3 or 4 pages that really were pretty specific in different areas. So I would think that Charlie Baxter would be a good resource for us as we keep moving along on this. I didn't ask him about legally vetting the document, but I know that they've had attorneys that have also worked on their committee. So that might be another thing that we want to ask them about, and say, how do you make sure when you create an ordinance that it's legally proper and all that sort of stuff. So anyhow, that's what we've accumulated so far.
So I wanted to reiterate, I think you were alluding to this, Eileen. It seems to me we have a two-pronged approach. One is the legal technical document, the tree ordinance, and we have to decide what kind of ordinance and who would vet it. Let's say it was a town ordinance and would be approved by the select board. But the other thing I think that's going to be very useful for us to do is to have a series of documents that aren't formal, that are advice about trees, so that members of the public can turn to the tree committee for advice about planting trees, about invasive species. And so those aren't those could be fluid and change as circumstances change, but they wouldn't be legal. It would more be like this is advice about trees, informal. Sort of what the lawn, I've forgotten now what it's called, the lawn committee, the advice about your lawns. And they have the magnetized things that you can put on your refrigerator, and we could try to replicate that for trees.
Oh yeah, I mean that making the connection with the educational component of what we're trying to do is, I think, the most useful thing. It's not like we're trying to create an ordinance that's going to go around punishing people.
Right.
What we want to do is, provide some more education, provide some more support for people who want to do the right thing.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing about the research we've done in the towns is that the tree ordinances cover trees that are on public land.
Right.
And so we also want to have trees that are on private land for people who are interested in doing the best thing possible with their trees.
Yeah.
So for instance, Dover, it's very clear this is for public land. And what they mean by that is 4 or 5 things that are very clear.
I agree with all of that. I think, I did ask Eileen if I could share a bit more about Dover's plan, because I think it does serve as a good model. But I think I was kind of struggling with, we have a whole lot of goals that we want to get out there, but how do we bring them together? And in looking at the different communities and kind of weighing, these really complex Newburyport style ordinances versus something more simple, I definitely fall on the spectrum of have a very simple ordinance that then tiers to a street tree management plan or, public tree management plan or whatever we want to call it. And that's where things like tree planting guidelines and species and, prioritization for replacement and all of those things can be put so that it can be a dynamic document that can be updated far more frequently. But we still have the connection with the ordinance so that we do have enforcement and buy-in by the town government. So that I agree with all of that. I think that's the right way to go. I also like the concept of it being a tree ordinance, because then it encompasses the community as a whole versus a zoning ordinance, which is, it just seems heavier handed, I guess. I don't know why. I feel that.
Well, I think the concept of it being a positive document as opposed to a punitive document is what we want to try to accomplish. And, there are times when you do need to be, I think of some of the problems we had with the trees on Lincoln Street. There's times when you want to say, no, that's not the right way to do it. And, there is a responsibility that you have to make sure that doesn't happen. But at the same time, you mostly want to say, as a town, as a community, these are the guidelines. We know how to plant trees carefully and successfully, and we have new technology, whether it's tree diapers or whatever, to make sure that they survive. So that but the trick will be to create the wording of an ordinance that's simple enough, and you hand it to the select board and you say, this is what we're trying to do. We're going to have another little, a booklet that tells you everything you need to know for town and public trees. But here's the gist of it. Here's our credo or something, and then they'll look at it and say, man, that's great. Thank you very much. You're golden. Come back in 2 weeks and give it to us again, and then we can vote on it. So I might give a call to Charlie again and find out, what kinds of process they had in getting their document approved. And, I know they're working on revamping it. So I told them that we're in kindergarten and he's in the high school or something. So we're trying to catch up, but maybe we can jump a few grades by getting some help from some experts and then have a good document ready to go. So I think we need to still, keep working on this to try to get the format of the first part of the document. But then I think everybody should just sort of keep in their head what kinds of things you'd want in those specifications. What ingredients would you like to see? Whether it's certainly all of them have types of recommended trees and trees to avoid, and a list of things that create, you could use this tree in this part, but don't ever put it here. Ways to find that information to provide, and that certainly can change over the years, but a way to create some of those details, and what else should be in a document like that. I mean, there are other Tree City USA, I think, or the Arbor Society or whatever, had a whole thing on, how to write this document. But I think we need to decide for ourselves, what do we want in that second half of it? So if,
Eileen, but before I jump off, can I just say a couple things?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope the ordinance really focuses on public trees, and we avoid any entanglement with private property.
Yeah.
And also related to Sally's comment, about Dover. I was wondering about logging. I really strongly suggest that the tree committee doesn't insert themselves in that. The state forester and the New Hampshire Division of Forest and Lands does enforcement, and they really discourage any town involvement in regulation of timber harvesting, because there's a right to timber harvesting law in New Hampshire that it prohibits towns from being overly burdensome on the forest industry. And there's a long history of challenges to local ordinances, and typically the industry is on the winning side of that. The local ordinances don't hold up. So I just suggest that we make sure to focus on public street trees and avoid those situations, and let the state handle that enforcement.
And I think if we can get the public street trees, an ordinance put together, we'll be doing well. And I think your point is well taken. And I don't think we want to extend ourselves in an area where it's another whole area that the tree committee is not the logging committee and the forestry committee. And we don't want to get in over our heads and find out we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, not that you were headed in that direction. I just
but
in a comment. We heading in a great direction here.
Okay,
Great point.
welcome, Sarah. How are you?
Good. Sorry, I had a conflicting meeting.
I know it's a tough, busy time. It's a busy time. So we've just to catch you up a little, Sarah. We've compared a bunch of towns and their tree ordinances, and so far the winners appear to be maybe Newburyport and Portsmouth in terms of their development of where they are, and we're still looking at trying to find a way to make the ordinance part of what we do as simple and direct as possible. And then the section, whether we call it specifications or whatever we call it, deals with all the nuts and bolts so that it has more flexibility. It's not an ordinance. It's a set of guidelines, essentially, that can be adjusted over the years. And so that's pretty much where we are at this point. Anybody have any other thing to throw in there? Because I want to give Kristen some time to tell us about what Dover's doing, because I'm intrigued. Kristen, why don't you take it away?
Thanks. So I don't really want to spend a ton of time on this. I don't want to take your time up doing that. But what I thought, and I'd be happy to share the document so that you can read it later, but what I thought I'd do is kind of give a taste of what Dover just recently accomplished, because I think it can serve, as I mentioned in the last meeting, as a great model for us. So as I said during the ordinance discussion, I really think this approach of having a regulatory side that then tees off to a management document is a great way to ensure that we keep our data up to date. It's easy to update. And so I talked a little bit about the tree inventory that Dover did. That was an incredible way to meet that education component. In Dover, they used Survey 123, which is an app that you can put on your phone that any volunteer could use. And when they open it up, they open the street tree inventory form. And so they can enter data as they go along, inventorying trees, the health of the tree condition, if there's, power lines overhead, if there's a stump there, if there's an empty tree box, that sort of thing. And then that information automatically goes into the city's GIS system so that as volunteers go along and collect the data, you get an updated GIS-based data set that can be used for management. And so, as you know, Jay, you had an intern complete the, I think it was called iTree work.
Right.
I think this would be a great way to continue that effort and build on it so that we can expand to other areas that I think you feel should be given more attention. But that's just one component of Dover's effort. So I wanted to step through their plan. And I just have a few, I'm going to share my screen real quick. Oops, sorry. A few bits and pieces that I wanted to pull out from their plan that I think that I think will meet a lot of the goals that we're trying to achieve here. And so it was when I went through all of the ordinance stuff and then I saw this plan, I was like, oh, that's how we do it. It doesn't have to be this complex town ordinance. It can just be a simple town ordinance as guidance and sort of the regulatory side of it that sets Exeter standards. And then the tree plan is where we can put other information that I think we want to ensure is adhered to.
So, Kristen, if I could just ask a question about this document.
Yeah.
Is this a document that came out of the inventory? I'm a little confused.
It is.
Okay.
So Dover collaborated with Stratford Regional Planning Commission, and they prepared this document for them. And so this document, the inventory is one component of it, but unlike our inventory, it also talks about the long-term goals, prioritization, and it's a little bit broader.
Yep.
And I think it would be fairly simple. Well, not simple. It would be an effort, but I think it's achievable in terms of what this committee can help Exeter achieve. So our document talks a lot about the financial incentives and economic benefits of trees in terms of stormwater management and kind of attributes a financial value to them that way. Dover's does the same thing. It talks about the role and the value of trees. This is information that you guys already put together in terms of the early language that we were playing with, like the environmental benefits and cooling benefits and CO2 sequestration and things of that nature. There's the inventory that I talked about. And it produced a bunch of maps that I'll show you in a sec, similar to Exeter's plan. It lists tree selection, like how do you choose the right tree for the right situation? There's installation and maintenance standards. So, how do you plant that tree? What's the proper way? What kind of maintenance does it need? Proper pruning techniques, things of that nature. And then there's a prioritization so that in Dover, they can then take this plan and identify what areas should we budget for in 2025? How many trees will we need and what should that effort be? So those are kind of some of the components, and I'll just show you a little bit of what the document includes. So this is their inventory form. They had both a paper version and the phone-based version. The paper version would have to be entered later, so it was a bit more cumbersome, but it allowed volunteers who weren't quite as phone savvy to still participate. And so people signed up, they did a whole lot of advertising. People signed up and they were assigned a street or multiple streets. They walked that street and collected, the standard information. They put a GPS point where the tree was. They identified, what species it was. And Dover had a training with how to use apps to identify trees. So you didn't have to be a tree expert to gather the data. Is it a tree box? And so they also collected information on, there used to be a tree here. It wouldn't take much to put one back. So they collected things like that, tree stumps, for example, any conditions that are of concern, dropping branches or disease or power lines overhead, that sort of thing. And a lot of this information is very similar to what Exeter collected in our tree inventory that was done for the So this is a map, very similar to our plan as well. So, the product from this is producible maps that identify, empty planting sites, existing trees, stumps, the health and condition of the trees, so that you can start to develop some of the priority areas to focus on, priority areas for next steps. And then their maintenance and planting requirements are right there in the document. So how do you plant them? It's a simple checklist that someone can walk through, dig the space 3 times the root ball, just kind of those standard planting techniques that sometimes get, sped up through and don't get followed, I guess. Another thing that I think would be incredibly helpful for us to kind of dig into for Exeter is the plan included a budget. And so how much would it cost? And I think this would be helpful for Jay and Greg and I in terms of the budget committee. How do we we have a document that talks about the financial value of the trees and how important they are, but what will it actually take to implement this plan in a way that I think we all are hoping that it can be? And so, the cost of an arborist or arborist inspections, incident by incident hiring, protocols, procurement plan, that sort of thing. So I think obviously this is set up for Dover, but I think with some tweaking, we could have something similar for Exeter. In this document, it also pulls all of the regulations in Dover that speak to trees into this one location and kind of summarizes them. So in Exeter, we do have our site plan review regulations do have criteria for planting through the planning board process. We do actually also have a timber ordinance that is problematic for reasons that Greg already pointed out. So all of those regulations will be pulled into one place. It's hyperlinked so you can get to them easily, but they're also summarized so that they're right there for the public or the contractors or whoever it is to access. And then the last thing I wanted to show was this is not in the document. They do have a list of species of trees that are approved by this committee and the city. And in Dover, they have different species for different areas. So like the Silver Street corridor has its own species that are acceptable. But the beauty of this, it's an Excel document. It's sortable and searchable. It lists species that are approved species. It talks about what those species needs are in terms of sun, their salt tolerance, what their size is, disease resistance, all of that information. Wow. Any management issues like, does this drop fruit or sort of ongoing things that you need to be aware of when you're planting the tree. I would love for us as a committee to go through this list and sort of prioritize. My personal preference is that we start moving toward native species. There's incredible information out there in terms of, the habitat value of our oaks, our native oaks, for example. And obviously oaks are large, but we do have swamp white oak that could be planted in a street tree setting. They support thousands of individual insects that birds and other critters are dependent on versus like a crepe myrtle that just doesn't, because it's not a food source for our local plants. And so I would love to go through this list and kind of tease out what native trees could provide that same aesthetic value, et cetera, and ensure that native is kind of the direction that we're trending. So I know it's a lot of information, but I just kind of wanted to tease your thoughts out. I'll stop sharing here and give you a taste of what is in that plan. But to me, it really is a comprehensive concept of what we've been talking about and achievable. I feel like, we have this document in a Word version and we put Exeter's version of all of this, a lot of the data on, how much stormwater does a tree absorb based on species is in our current inventory. We can pull all of that information into this document.
Yeah, I love this. I love that document.
Yeah.
So tell me something about where is the document and who owns it, so to speak?
So it's just recently released. It was, I believe, approved by the planning board in I don't know, the last week or two. So it's just now been approved as their official document. It went through their Conservation Commission for a recommendation and so on. Part of that is because Dover uses their street tree plan, and this kind of opens up a whole another aspect of it, but Dover uses their street plan to justify some of their stormwater management requirements, and it meets their MS4 permit requirements. And so they use that to try to demonstrate how they're a portion of how they deal with stormwater. So that's why it was important for it to be adopted by the planning board. I think, I think that's important that it be, I don't know how that process would work in Exeter. I don't know if it needs to do that, if just presentations are appropriate or how that would be managed, but it's something that we certainly could talk through.
Kristen, I'm going to have to jump off here in 10 minutes for another meeting. However, I couldn't agree more with the native trees and looking for those. But that list, was that checked? As we all know, the nurseries are stuffed full with so many different varieties. And I think any list that we can draft, we should make sure that they are readily available. Yeah. And on to two more things before I have to go is my big goals is to layer the iTree onto the town's GIS. And after we did it, that was the goal. And the fellow that was working on it has since left the town's employment, and the position's still open for a GIS technician. And my second goal is to update the town's standard specifications for construction in the town on our end for DPW. That would be huge help to me. There's already a few paragraphs in there, but it really doesn't get into detail for contractors who are digging in the street near trees, and it's kind of like an overview what to do. So that's another goal I have, is to, when we do hire someone, is to get that document updated, and somehow I can share that with all of you.
So Jay, where does that document live right now? Is it just a public works guidance document, or is it in our regs, or?
Yes, it's in the regulations. It's on the DPW website. You have to be licensed to do any excavation in the town of Exeter. And it's been updated in the last few years with a few amendments to it, but we've had it for quite a while, and it can be found on our website.
Great. And then Jay, just so that you are aware, so all of the data that was collected was on Daniel's computer, but I did request Andy Swanson pull the data into our network because, that we have GIS in the planning department. That would be something that I could easily use, update the maps, et cetera, if we get to a stage where we could do something like Survey 123 to continually update our street tree inventory. And I did also talk to Andy. He is looking into, it's unclear to me whether our GIS license allows us access to Survey 123, but he's looking into that now. So I'm hoping that we can, get that stuff off that individual computer into the network where we all have access to it and we can use it. You can say, what where are the areas we should focus? I'm looking for, large gaps. But I have this huge budget for trees. This is ideal, not realistic, but where should we focus? And we can pull that up and go through the maps.
That would be great. That would be the best tool for me. When someone applies for an excavation permit, I know the location, the address, but I have no way right now to see online if it's near any trees, large trees or whatever, where it is in the right of way. So when we first went with iTree, the folks there said that it could be put layered onto our GIS. And then Daniel said it wasn't quite that easy and he was working on it, but that was the last I've heard. So yeah, that would be huge to me. Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We will. Well, anyway, yeah.
I had two questions for Kristen. The folks in Dover, that process of finding volunteers, training them, and doing the actual inventory from start to finish, what was the time frame for that? And it would be interesting to talk to one or two of the folks who did that and find out. I mean, if we were going to look for volunteers, it would be great to have somebody to talk to who did that and say, would you be willing to go on camera and say, God, I had a great time and this was fun. It wasn't hard to do. So those are two questions.
Yeah, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I will, be upfront. And so this was a contract with SRP, Stratford Regional Planning Commission.
Right.
They were the ones who did the volunteer coordination. They did the
they did. Okay.
Training.
Okay.
The video link that I think we shared after the last meeting, that is a presentation on this report, talks about how many volunteers and volunteer hours the inventory required and how many hours SRPC had to contribute. And I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but I want to say it was something like 17 volunteers plus Liz Durfee's time to finish the inventory or double check the data, or I don't know what that involvement was. I will also say, so Kyle Pimentel with SRPC was more than I had raised when this was presented to Dover's Conservation Commission. I had raised like strong interest in this, and he said, we would love for this to serve as a model for other communities, and if there's ways that, we can help you, reach out to me. I would be more than happy to put you in touch with our GIS guy so that you could get Survey 123 forms that we used and things of that nature. So I think it will take some effort and a chunk of time, but we have this huge group of volunteers already that puts us,
right. And then they could be a real resource for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Do we need to connect with the Rockingham Planning Commission to see if there's a way that they could help us coordinate something there?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. When I initially had the questions about Survey 123, because I see a lot of use for that in my world, like monitoring conservation lands. It would be awesome to use that. I reached out to Rob at RPC, their GIS coordinator, and he said it's very easy to use. I think he would be a great support for us. And I think we'll need that because, I don't know how to create these forms, but he seemed more than willing to do that if we do, in fact, have access to Survey 123. And so, I don't know. I think we'd have to get a little bit ahead of it in terms of having the budgetary dollars to work with RPC, hire RPC to do something similar. But if we could try to chip away in-house as best we can and then maybe figure out what we need in terms of support from them, I think we could take that approach.
Do you want me to talk with Tim at RPC to just let him know what we're doing and see if he has any thoughts on helping us?
Yeah,
I'd be happy to do that.
I think that would be great.
I was going to ask you whether you thought this was a project that we should and could take on by ourselves, or if you thought it would be advantageous if it isn't expensive, if there isn't a high cost involved, to have RPC help us out with it. But maybe I can get some information from Tim about that and let you know at our next meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it should hurt at all. I guess I haven't spent enough time with the report to understand if it's something that we could just do. I mean, Jay has a ton of expertise. We have Kevin and we have Greg in terms of, tree planting guidelines. I think, Sarah, you know how to work the dynamics with utilities. I think we have a lot of the expertise that we need. Yeah. I don't know that we have the time. So
I know what I was thinking too. This might, if we had a template and which may speed things up a little bit, that might be helpful. But I don't know if going with the RPCs is the right way to do it, but it might help.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my thought is if we needed funds to work with RPC, why don't we attempt in the interim to see what we can pull off? You know, I don't know. But maybe Tim has a thought for, hey, no big deal. We could do that through, if there's this grant opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Also do that.
You never know.
That's how Dover
Kristen,
had it. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just a question about accessing the report. Can we access the report?
Yeah, I'll send a link to the report.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, folks, I'm going to have to jump off. I have another meeting I have to attend, so I want to thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Kevin, would you think it would be tricky to train some plain old walking around folks to do this sort of a survey?
No, I don't think so. We could do a street together, and at least it'll get us some data. If it's
that would be a good way to
80% accurate, it's better than nothing. But at least I don't think it would be very hard.
Okay.
And I know Dover talked a lot about some of the apps that they use. So I think it would be for Tree ID, for example. I think it would be great to get those, and maybe as a committee we attempt collecting the data once we have the form and see how it works, and then reach out to others. But I've been really impressed with apps like Picture This for identifying, even annuals, half-nest annuals, so accurately. So I think that, I don't know, I think sadly, apps are out there that can replace all of us people who love keying out plants. It's too convenient to ignore.
Well, it would be fun, in addition to the hard stuff we're trying to do, is to maybe have a collection of apps like you mentioned, and have everybody try out. I'm not particularly adept at apps on my phone for that sort of thing. So, for some of us, it's a learning experience. For others, it's like, I can do that one and this one and this one and this one. But if we all are a little more savvy about using those things, we might discover it's sort of like walking around with a encyclopedia in your pocket, and you just hold your phone up to something and you go, oh, that's what that tree is, instead of guessing. So if anybody wants to just maybe share what apps they've used, Picture This is one you mentioned, Kristen, and anybody else have a favorite?
I use Leaf Snap occasionally.
What's it called? Leaf Snap?
I think that's what it is. Let's see if I can.
I've used Plant Snap for gardening purposes, which I don't think it's very good, honestly.
Yeah,
it sends me down the wrong direction. Leaf Map.
Okay, Leaf Snap.
Leaf Snap.
You got any favorites, Kevin?
I haven't had much luck with those apps. No.
Okay.
It would be great to have you along, Kevin. To
I know he's a walking app.
He's our app. Yeah.
He's our walking app.
To just kind of test the effectiveness of them.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's what you want. But I think the inventory thing with people doing that and learning how to input that information is really invaluable. And if you figure out the volunteer hours that people got in Dover for doing that, that was a real win-win for the city of Dover, huh?
And what a great educational, once people are out there and they've walked that street and, they get to know the trees that are on it, I guarantee they'd be the best advocates for proper management of those trees.
Well, there's something about being able to name what you see, to just know what that is. And then you say, I go down Salem Street and I see that big old elm tree and I feel much more protective about it because I know what it is. And, it's stuff in your own neighborhood, in your own yard, but everybody needs a name. And it's like knowing all you folks. If we don't walk down the street and go, what was their name? Oh, I can't remember them. No, now you can walk down and see the tree and remember their name. I think for our purposes, and we have a lot of things. I feel like we're going in a fair number of directions, but we want to keep working and refining what we want to say for the actual ordinance that would have to go before the select board. And I guess maybe that's still job number one. And maybe having looked at Portsmouth or Newburyport or some of the ones that seem to be pretty good and less complicated, if between now and the next meeting, we see if we can pare it down to the basics of what we would like to say. I know Kristen and Gwen and Sally also did some good work with the original form that I sent to the select board in, I guess, December or something. And so if there's any, maybe we want to look at one of those and see if there's anything that we can tune up a little bit more and get to a point at the next meeting where we say, okay, let's read it together, see what we think, and could this be ready for prime time? Maybe a goal is like we'd like to present it as an ordinance to the select board for May or something. I'm just making up a date. I don't know. And that would sort of give us a target to kind of get that. And we can work on the other stuff simultaneously, but I think it'd be nice to have that piece.
So I just want to make sure that that all of the ordinances that people have reviewed, are they available on that document that I haven't looked at it for the past 2 days.
I think there's a link for each one of those.
There's a link for each one.
Yeah, so there.
So we're talking about Dover, Durham, Newburyport, Portsmouth. Those four?
And all four are on there.
Okay, great. Great.
I'm wondering, Kevin, so thinking about what Jay said about tree species, and Sarah, maybe you know this as well. So I do wonder what kind of influence having communities have a list of trees, that these are the trees that we'll focus on, what kind of influence that could have over organizations that provide trees. If Dave Short might be like, oh, well, I can find a way to get those species.
Absolutely. I think, reaching out to our nurseries and telling them, we're looking for these types of things is helpful. We've done that from a utility standpoint where we're looking for specific low growing trees for screens or other things, and nurseries, didn't carry a ton of them. And we would say, well, we're looking for these. Can we, work with you to grow some of them? We'll be buying, a bunch. So certainly those conversations are very helpful because they are trying to guess what people are going to be buying or steer them towards something. And if they know that we will be purchasing something or steering people to a species, then they might be more inclined to have someone grow that for them. So I definitely think those conversations and getting, a good connection with local nurseries is great, especially, helping them to let them know that we're going to be, giving a guide for our customers, and certainly getting input from them as well. Like, these are hard to find, or, they tend to have some transport issues or whatever. So we can learn from them as well.
So, Kristen, in addition to the report link you're going to send us, I think you said that the list of trees was a separate document, that spreadsheet. Can we get that too?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. And I think the contact with the local nurseries I think that really isn't going to be important, because we can't advise people to plant these trees if they can't get them.
Right.
And I suspect that Dave Short, would be happy to sit down with us with that list of trees and say exactly what Sarah said. That tree is great in concept, but in reality, it's not a good.
Yeah, I mean, there's some thought to climate change and resilient trees would be good as well. Storm resistant type trees, and a good variety, so that we're not planting the same thing. So making sure our list is big enough that people can find something in the category that they want, not too huge so that they feel overwhelmed and not helpful. And, just putting some of those types of things into perspective. Yeah. We could add different things like looking for color. These are great trees. Looking for special size. You can put them into categories to help people be able to guide what they're looking for. Are they looking for pollinator, habitat, those kinds of things. We can certainly list out the different benefits so people can say, oh, what do I want to drive, on my property, or, help the town, with as well.
Yeah. That ought to keep us all out of trouble for the next month, shouldn't it? Let me just sort of, if everyone has a little bit of time to take a look at some of those ordinances, and we can come together next time and say, okay, we could pare down this paragraph, or we could tune this up, or whatever, so that in the next month or two, we'd have something that could go before the select board. Not that I don't have any need to rush it. I want to do it right. And, but then at the same time, take a look at what Dover is doing with this, the inventory, and try to, think about how neat that would be, and look at the possibilities, and then keep your eye out for Exeter TV, because we're going to see our tree walk and talk video sometime. I'm not quite sure when, but I'll let you know as soon as I have something specific. But that was a great day, Kevin. I really appreciate your input, and it was great to have all the guys from the Swayze trustees there. That was a pleasant surprise, and
it was a nice surprise. Yeah,
that was good,
because they were a ton of information coming out of those guys.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I do have one question.
Yeah.
Do we have a collaborative workspace where we can edit the document sort of simultaneously, like a Google Docs or share site, where we can access
that's above my pay grade, Sarah. I don't know how to do that, but I'm sure.
Okay, because
I'm sure there's a way to do something like that.
I mean, I could certainly add it to my drive, but I don't want to do it if, it seems as though doing that for the ordinance sort of posed a challenge as well. So I don't want to do that if that limits people's ability to.
I was just thinking, like, then, if we had a draft where we wanted to just make some comments in that forum, people could edit some things and we could see what they're doing without sending 100 emails around. I have a very hard time getting through the large quantity of emails, and it's easier for me to just say, all right, I'm going to dedicate this time in my evening to go look at what's on the drive rather than search through all my emails to try to compile everything. Yeah. So that would be my preference if we could figure that out. If not, I'm sure we can work through it. But, if we're compiling like a tree list and some of those things we want to put in the brochures, we could draft what we wanted some of those headings to be and try to put trees underneath them and then get some feedback from the nursery. It just might be your way to collaborate on those, but I'm open to whatever.
And if it's easier, Eileen, I would be happy to. I think we could even do it virtually, but sit down virtually. If you sit down and go through, how do you access it on the drive, and how does this work? I'd be happy to help with that.
I guess I'm such a blank slate when it comes to stuff like this that I think. I have this fear that I would throw monkey wrenches into the mess than already exist.
I do totally agree with Sarah that it's hard. It's challenging to go through the long list of emails. Stuff gets lost. It ends up in the spam folder.
Yeah, I know.
You delete it by mistake. All sorts of things. It's kind of overwhelming. So something that would be we could have a master document and then, I don't know, something to go along with it so that the document itself doesn't change, but that people's comments can be made. I'm not quite sure what the method would be for doing that, but.
I like that idea. It can be overwhelming to get a document that's got
track
lines
changes,
crossed out, red markings, and sort of. I get overwhelmed by that. That's just me. But I like in having a attachment or something that people can maybe add to, and that could be reviewed. I don't know how easy that would be to set up, but I'm kind of a dinosaur when it comes to a lot of that technology, as Kristen knows.
So, Google Docs works just like Microsoft Word. And you can add comments off to the side in the margin. You can, make all of the same things that you do in Word, you can do in Google Docs. It just lives not on your computer.
Yeah, so it wouldn't alleviate any of the...
Google Docs is in the cloud?
Yep.
Yeah.
It is?
So it wouldn't alleviate any of the track changes things. Those are still there. You can turn those on and off. You can see the final version. You can see all the changes, and you can see who made them. So if you hover over it, it'll say my name, Sarah, my Google account, and see what I typed in there, or you can see the comments. And you can change the view to turn those off and on. But the benefit of having it in the cloud is that there's only one document that everyone's editing. So if Eileen sends out the document to all of us and we happen to all on the same day start making edits and send it back, then somebody has to if all those, compile them, and I don't see your edits when I'm making mine. Whereas if it's in the cloud, then if you made edits this morning and I made edits in the evening, I will see your morning edits. Even, you don't have to email them out to everybody. Yeah, they're just there.
So it's live. It's a live thing.
Yeah.
And
people can be in it at the same time. If somebody's in it at the same time, you'll see their cursor and you'll see what they're typing. Mm. So you'd be like, oh, I'll stay away from that section because Sally's working on that one right now or something. The chances of us being in the document at the same time are low.
At the same time, right.
We're prepping for a meeting or something. But it just makes it have one repository place, and then we know what the latest version is. It works well if you don't have too many editors. If there's tons of people editing, it can get crazy. But just a thought. I mean, if we are ready for that, that's fine. We can do some more document sending around. I think we've made that work. It wasn't a huge issue. Just trying to see if there was more technology we could use.
I think we might be one meeting away from that. So what I was going to suggest is that between now and the next meeting, if everyone took a look at the ordinances that are on our that we have access to, and determined individually, these are the things that I definitely think should be in our ordinance, and we have that laid out, and then we can figure out how the document should be written to incorporate all of those things that people think should be in there. But right now we have there are a lot of ideas out there from different towns, but I think we need to then say, okay, what do we want to borrow from these, and make sure that they're in our. I
like that, Sally. Suppose we don't aim for the moon here, and that everybody take a look at what's been presented on those links and say, here's one sentence I loved, here's another thing I like, and then we'll come back and find a way to see, are those ingredients we want to add?
Yep.
Or are those things that we saw there that, we don't need to have in our ordinance? Yeah, I think that's more doable. And in terms of time here, I'm sure people have got to get going. Let's plan to do that. Take a look at what's been presented from the different towns and see how that relates to what we're trying to do. And then come the next meeting, we'll go ahead and say, what did you find that was valuable? And see if that's something that we need to find a way to add.
And we might want to consider doing what we did the last time, which is after the next meeting, have a subcommittee to come up with a document based on our discussion, and then that document can be the basis for the Google Docs for editing. I think that might be manageable.
I think that's a good progression of what we're trying to do. All right, why don't we just take a look at next month, a meeting date for folks. We've kind of jumped back and forth between Wednesdays and Thursdays. We can look at the first or the second week in April. Anybody have any preference for day of the week?
I'm pretty much out of, I can't do Thursdays. I'm not
Thursday, right. Yep. Okay, so if we stick with Wednesday, April 7th or April 14th, anybody have any problem with one or the other?
I can make both work. So.
Yep, me too.
Yep.
Okay, you want to go with the 7th? March is a longer month. We have a little more time. I don't know.
No, that works.
And I did have one thing I wanted to share before we sign off for the meeting. We are holding our annual rain barrel sale.
Oh, yes, I saw that online.
Yeah, so we have rain barrels for sale through the Great American Rain Barrel Company. It's a community program. They're $79, and orders can be placed up through April 11th, and then they'll be delivered April 17th. So you can access the link and the flyer and all of that on the town's website under Conservation Commission News. Soon it will be moved to latest news of the Exeter website, and it's also on the Concom's Facebook page.
It should be noted that last year, Kristen delivered these rain barrels in her car.
I have a tiny car, so one rain barrel at a time.
She was running around town delivering rain barrels.
This year, thankfully, we can, as long as we schedule pickup times, we can have people come to us.
Yeah. Good.
It's a sign of improvement, right? Things are getting better.
Yeah, things are getting better. And I love the rain barrel program. I mentioned at ConCon last night. I'm going to get my second one.
All right.
So thank you.
Okay, so we're good for April 7th?
At 8:30? 8:30?
8:30?
Great.
Thank you all. I apologize.
Just one quick thing to, I don't want to lose sight of this, that we have that tree that's either in bad shape or dead up by where we have the Tree City USA. So I think we ought to pay attention to that. Get Jay and Kevin maybe to look at it and say, is this tree a goner? And if so, we should plan on replacing it, I think.
I know that in the conversation on the tree walk, Dave Short mentioned that tree.
Yeah.
And he said he thought it was gone and that he was going to be willing to donate a tree to replace
awesome. Awesome.
So we got a lot of nice teamwork in this town, I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right, on that happy note, I'll see you folks in April, and we'll know a lot more about apps and clouds and ordinances between now and then. It's going to be great. I can do these things. All right.
Great.
Thank you all.
Have a
Great
good day.
meeting, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.